The Overcoming Adversity podcast, where it's all about a transformational growth and having a resilient mindset. You know that 1 in 7 kids in the United States suffer and go through child abuse. And that's something that no kid should ever deal with. Today's guest is here to talk about his story and how he has overcame those types of adversity. And I can't wait for him to come on here, talk about his story, and share his story with you guys. So let's get into the podcast. Welcome to the Overcoming Adversity podcast, Keeper. Thank you so much for joining me and being on here today, man. It's an honor.
Hey, Michael, how are you? Thank you for having me. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much. You know, as I was getting ready to have you on the show, I was thinking about when I wrote my book and how much of an impact it had made from all of the feedback that I got in regards to me just being transparent and vulnerable and just sharing my story, even if it was to make an impact with one person. I didn't set out to be like a bestseller or any of those things. I just wanted to share my story and just help people. Coming from the community down here in Miami, Florida, I just wanted to share that story. Sir, you have an incredible story, and I just want to give you this platform, sir, to come on here, share your story, share with the impact that you're trying to make and the changes you're trying to make, man. So thank you for being here, man. It's an absolute honor.
Oh, no, the pleasure is all mine, really. And you don't have to call me sir. I will be 65 in December. I don't need anyone else calling me sir. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, man. So Keeper, let's get into it, man.
Right.
If you can, man, tell us a little bit about your background, where you came from, and just some of the things that impacted you as you grew up, man.
Okay. My background, my family, we grew up in South Central LA, very, very poor. I went to 11 grade schools before I graduated high school. We were homeless 3 times, lived in 21 different places before I moved out. And this was like around 23. So I know what the trauma is like of being upended as a child and not having any sort of stability. And as we grew, my mother was a singer. And at one point she asked if me and my brothers and sisters, I have 4 sisters, 3 brothers, if we wanted to sing. And then we said, of course. So, because we all loved the Jackson 5 back in the early 70s. So short story, rather long story short, one day we were rehearsing. And we had started to become popular in LA at the time. And we were just all over the place, and we were doing some things, and the phone rings. And my mom says, shh. And we stop, and she says, hello? Who? And she looks at one of my younger brothers and says, Michael Jackson's on the phone. Now, we are very poor. I mean, we are on food stamps. We are on government subsidies. We are having to go into the street to collect bottles just to get a pound of ground beef.
Mm-hmm.
And Michael Jackson's on the phone. And he's telling us, y'all need to keep going. Do not quit. Jump cut, 7 years later, we were about to sign with Motown. And this is 3 years after they had lost to Jackson 5, and they were looking for the family to replace them. And it was us. And we are about to sign this contract when we're all called into the living room for a family meeting. And it's at that time, me and my 3 brothers hear the words from my mother that no brother ever wants to hear. The words we could never, ever prepare for.
Wow.
And that is that. And understand, we are about to learn next week, we're about to sign the largest new artist contract from Motown. That's what we were expecting to hear. But what we heard was my mother stood in front of us and said, your stepfather has been molesting your sisters for years. And then she dropped the next bombshell, and that is, I've known about it the whole time.
Wow.
So you are a brother. Relationships with brothers and sisters that could never be broken Michael lay on the living room floor in shambles, completely destroyed. And the fallout from that, not only relationships falling apart, but the trauma as a brother, not knowing and then knowing and knowing there's nothing you can do about it. And it is suffocating because you don't know what to do. And I went on 45 years trying to figure out how to talk to my sisters, how to understand who I am, because everything that I thought I was and thought we were was gone like that. So it's a pretty in-depth story, but that's the short version of how the journey begins.
So the revelation of learning about this family, I guess, deep dark secret is truly, truly impactful, especially as kids. And then knowing that you're on the verge of something great,
Right.
at the fingertip, you know, I guess is I'm kind of like lost for words thinking about it, but going through that now, how did things unpack or unravel in your family household, knowing that this bombshell just dropped on you?
When we boys learned of it, now keep in mind, my sisters they know about it because they were in the middle of it. And so
Right,
their trauma is, there's no way to describe it.
right,
There really isn't. And now we are brought into it. And one of the things that came immediately out of that conversation was my older sister turning around and telling us boys, we can't talk about it because it didn't happen to you. It only happened to us girls. Well, the reality is it did happen to us. We just didn't know about it. And then to be told by the people we needed to speak to the most, our sisters, that we cannot talk to them was even more devastating. It just really locked us down because we didn't even talk to each other. Now, me and my older brother, we were molested by our babysitter almost daily for 6 months, 6 years before our sisters. So I understand both sides of this child sexual abuse coin. I understand the damage and I understand the collateral damage. So as our relationships broke apart and brothers and sisters just stopped talking, there was no way anyone could break us apart. But I tell you, relationships like these need to be honored because they are really and literally hanging on by a thread, because at any moment something could be said, something can be brought forward and things just fall apart. Family units just are destroyed. So I had lost all sense of who I was. And as a brother, there was nowhere for me to go to find information, Michael, just absolutely nothing. You know, there are plenty of articles and even movies and documentaries about women and girls, unfortunately, because as men, we have not been the best historically.
right.
And so everything that women talk about their abuses absolutely should be honored. It should be respected. My position is brothers, especially innocent ones, where do we go? There are no documentaries, there are no movies, there are no books, there's nothing. And so I was just completely lost. And so were my other three brothers. And we just did not know what to do for decades. We would hear the whispers from our sisters, such as, how come you didn't do this? How could you not know? You know, every now and then we'd be hit with this, but we didn't know what to do. We were completely lost. And all of my manhood, all of the things that I thought made me a good brother were completely just stripped away. So the journey has been, how do I honor my sisters? And then how do I figure out a way to give voice and elevate the voice of brothers in the child sexual abuse space?
So, Keeper, you know, men struggle with isolation, identity, especially after facing these types of trauma. And going through this at a young age, and you've already identified that when you're looking for an outlet, there's nothing there.
Right.
How did you manage to even cope through that and deal with that at the time, knowing that you had no outlet?
Um, it was difficult. It was difficult. It was very hard, because the people that we needed to speak to, or the people that we would typically go to for help, our mothers or our fathers or stepfathers, they are the ones who betrayed us.
Right.
And then the people who we would want to talk to told us we couldn't talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
So it then becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy as far as PTSD goes, because what is now happening is the trauma is quite evident in front of us, but it's the trauma that we don't see. The post-traumatic trauma that we don't see is where we were caught, is where I was caught. There was nowhere for me to go, Michael. I was so afraid of my sisters for 45 years. It wasn't until about 10 years ago that I found the courage to actually talk to one of them about it. You go through this thing of not only how could you not know, but then what are you supposed to do as a brother? Because your mother has betrayed you, your stepfather has betrayed you. And when you are a man in this situation, anything that you do or say can become deadly at any second.
Right.
So there was a period of about 9 years where my mother constantly said that she was going to take care of things, but she never did. And that was easy for me to accept. And all of this is in the book. Every vulnerability, every place that I messed up is in the book, because like you, I believe you have to be vulnerable if you're really going to tell the story. You really have to be, you have to really bring it out. And it took me 9 years to act. And my act was 3 months before I was getting married. This is what I met my stepfather in the hallway upstairs, and I gave him 24 hours to leave the house. And I told him, if you are still here by this time tomorrow, you will be dead, because I will have killed you. And that would have been another cascade of emotional trauma for my sisters. But that's where, as a brother, because we have no outlets, we have no support system, we have no tools, there's nothing for us, you start to, the darkness just really starts to close down on you, and you figure you've got to do something. It's usually lashing out, and the lashing out ends up being the worst decision, but I felt I had to do something. So my journey has always been about, how do I recapture my manhood, and more importantly, how do I recapture the respect of my sisters?
Mm-hmm.
And it um, it's hard when you're a brother, because you're just lost.
Mm-hmm.
And so my journey was trying to figure this out for myself. What I ended up doing was being able to identify someone that I could talk to, who would talk to me without judgment, and just tell this gentleman, this is what I've been going through. And I found that to be the greatest thing that I could do, because it brought recognition. It meant I was accepting the failures and accepting my trauma. And once you can do that, then you can begin to take the steps to heal. But it took me decades to get there.
You know what? I was speaking to someone several days ago, and they were asking me, why did I just come out with my book? And I started writing my book 6 years ago, and it took years, like you've mentioned, just to even become vulnerable and transparent. So speaking of that, you were bottling in so many emotions, so many thoughts, and so many feelings for years. And that segmented and fractured your family dynamics. I wanted you to see if you could talk a little bit about how much of an impact that strain put on your family as you guys grew up, whether in the household, whether it was through school, whether it was through like you guys are now adults. Are you guys communicating? Is it through the reunions or family get family get-togethers and things like that? How much of an impact did those incidents as younger kids lasted? Was it 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? Can you talk a little bit about how much of an impact that was for you and your family?
The greatest impact is that it lasted decades. We would get together maybe for a holiday, or we may have a family picnic, but there was always the strain. You could feel the strain. It was palpable
Mhm,
between what we call the boys and the girls.
mhm,
And as I said, relationships that at one point were so incredibly tight, half of us stopped talking to each other. And when you are as tight as we were, which is not uncommon for brothers and sisters, when you have those kind of relationships, a part of you is broken off, and it's almost impossible to put it back together. So with school, for me, my obsession became, how do I get back into a relationship with my sisters? Many of us went decades without talking to each other. And like your book, my book took 10 years to write. But what ended up happening, what came out of it as I began to write it 10 years ago, and that's when we started talking again.
mm,
That's when me and a number of my sisters started being able to discuss things
mhm,
again. And nothing necessarily what happened, but we started being able to communicate and see each other, and started to enjoy each other's company again, even though the underlying issue was still there. But what happened was, once I started being outwardly vocal about what happened and wanting to talk, it brought everyone else back into the fold. Everyone else wanted to talk. Everyone else had things that they wanted to share or get off their chest, which is the way it's supposed to be.
mhm.
So,
Right.
for me and my brothers and sisters, many of us are now really good friends again. That is what has come out of me talking, and that is what has to happen, because we all have this fear that if I talk, if I say something. For me, I wanted to go talk to my sisters, and knowing that as soon as I did, they were going to say, hell no, I don't want to talk to you. But I had gotten to a place, Michael, where I said, you know what, that's just what I have to go through. If I'm going to have any kind of relationship with them, I am going to have to do that, because they are hurting too. I finally recognize they are hurting too.
Right.
And so, as I continued to push forward and wanting to discuss what happened, it really it became cathartic. It became a very much of a healing process for each of us. But it took a long time, and it impacted them in school. It impacted their relationships. Many of them didn't want anything to, outside of their family and super close friends. They didn't want to go anywhere. They didn't want to do anything, because this fear of what could happen to them again. And so, as brothers, our fear is, will we ever be able to have relationships with our sisters? Knowing that if if we try to go to the church, which is what I tried to do after a while, they wanted nothing to do with me, because they have their own problems around these issues. Schools have their own problems around these issues. Legislative bodies have their own personal problems around these issues. So there was nothing for me to do except try to embrace who I am and what I'm dealing with. And hopefully my sisters would be open to having a discussion. And they did, simply because I stepped forward and someone wanted to discuss what was going on.
So you said something key a moment ago. Society doesn't accept these types of conversation, these types of topics, right? It's shunned upon. And like you said, within these organizations, a good bit of the times, some of these same things are going on. Based off your knowledge and your experience now, what do you think are some things that could help bring some awareness around some of these serious topics? Like I mentioned before, 1 in 7 kids are facing this,
Hmm.
right? What?
Well, there's the 1 in 7. There's a website called 1 in 6, or 1 in 6 young boys before they're 18 will be sexually abused. Women, the numbers are even like 1 in 4 and 1 in 5. And what has to happen is, particularly for brothers, we need to be engaged in the conversation. What ends up happening is, as a brother, I'm often asked when I speaking. So, what are the things that brothers need? That brothers need. First of all, brothers are held accountable for something we did not know about, and then second of all, because we are held accountable, we need to come up with a way to speak about what happened. So the only way that we can do this is elevate the voices of brothers. I am the leading voice on this topic, the impact on the trauma of brothers once they learn about their sisters. There is no other conversation out there or anyone else talking about it but me. So we have to come together. We have to figure out how to engage with our sisters, I think is the most important step. Because if we're talking about healing the family, you have to go to the center of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you cannot get to the center and deal with what's happening, brothers and sisters do not heal, which means the family does not heal. And that leaves, that perpetuates, those things become generational. I was talking to my sister about this the other day, and she was saying, one of the things with me and my kids, I started to notice that some things I would answer, they would ask me a question, I would answer, and I'm like, wow, I didn't need to have that particular answer. But then she started to realize, oh, that was born out of what happened to me 40 years ago. And
Mm-hmm.
so if we're going to do that with our children, we start handing down some of this trauma. We have to be very, very careful. So you have to have the conversation. That's number one. And as you said, Michael, there are organizations and institutions that do not want this conversation. But these are the most important conversations. People don't want to talk about politics. They don't want to talk about religion. They don't want to talk about sexual abuse. But these are the conversations that matter the most. And if you're talking about sexual abuse, you're talking about a tremendous impact on the family. And you have to be able to deal with this. My mother, to this day, wants nothing to do with this conversation, which is sad to me. I'm of the belief that my family's trauma can be one that is discussed so that it helps other families heal. So for me, my trauma doesn't need to be something that is always dark. It could bring light to other people, it could bring light to other individuals, it could bring light to other brothers who need to talk. I was at a conference a few years ago in 2013, and I was asked to talk about what happened. And when I was done, women just surrounded me. I could not believe it. And I'm at my desk in this huge conference room, and I had to get up and leave the room because women are saying, I wish my brothers had heard about what you were talking about. So, Michael, I leave the room, and then the double doors burst open. And I am surrounded by more women telling me that this is what they need to hear and this is what they want their brothers to hear. But the conversations that stood out the most were 3 women told me their brothers had committed suicide because they weren't there to help their sisters. The trauma was that impactful for them, was that dramatic. So what we need to do is be able to create a platform for brothers. There's a platform for everyone else. Our feelings cannot be shunted to the side. No one ever asks, are we okay? Do we need to talk? Is there anything you need? That never happens. Even to this day, my sisters have not asked me this, even though they know I have written a book. And they even participate in the book. They contribute plenty to the book. There are sections that they bring to the book. So you get a full family view, and yet I have still never been asked, are you okay? Do you need to talk?
Deeper.
So we have to, yeah.
You almost brought me to tears, man, because I'm going to share something with you. So I recently spoke twice over the past month, and I got on stage, shared my story, and my wife was with me, and we did some book signings afterwards. And literally, what you just said is the same thing that occurred to me. We were surrounded by women telling us, you need to share the story more. You need to help more people. I know so many people are going through this. I have siblings that has been through this, has gone through some of these things, try to commit suicide.
Yeah.
And it was like, keep going,
Yeah.
because your story is resonating.
Yeah.
And for you to share that helps me believe that like I'm doing the right thing
You
also.
are doing the right thing, man. There is absolutely no question about it. It's, I imagine that you're like me. I have no illusions about that this becomes a bestseller and all this stuff, but I know if I could help one person,
Hmm.
my job is done, because this is what I know. Tonight at 1 o'clock in the morning, some little girl or boy who was out playing at school all day come home, hug their mom and dad, watch TV, play with their dog. They're going to go to bed, but at 1 o'clock in the morning, someone, because this happens 186 times a year in the United States, opens the door and goes into their bedroom and molests them. Tonight, the same thing will happen because it happened yesterday. Tomorrow, it will happen again. 186 times a year, a child is sexually abused, and those are the ones we know about. That is a staggering statistic to me, and that is the statistic that tells me why I have to keep going. Because if I can help one of them, my job is done.
Hmm.
But imagine if I can impact hundreds of them. Because if one of them is sexually abused, what's going to happen to, say, one of the little girls? They're going to have a brother like me. Their sister's going to stop talking to them at age 6, and they're not going to know why.
Hmm.
They're not going to know what happened. They're not going to know that their father or stepfather, someone came into their bedroom. They're going to keep quiet. But then the impact emotionally on the family, that's what it lands. You just don't know. So you just have to keep going. Your story is too important to be kept quiet. Your story, Michael, is a gift. And if you can understand that part of it, oh, I'm gifting this, it really changes how you see this.
Right.
So you are absolutely correct. And those women are absolutely correct. You have to tell your story. Because it's certainly being a black man. Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things with child sexual abuse. There is no greater community in America where child sexual abuse happens the most than in the black community.
You're
And
right.
we are the ones who don't want to talk about it.
You're so right about that. So when I did more research, right, it's obviously huge in America based off the statistics that we just discussed. And then you also mentioned for the ones that are known about. So I'm from Jamaica. I'm from the islands, and that's something that goes on all the time.
It's an epidemic. It is not a pandemic. It is an epidemic that has been generations.
Generations, man.
And we're talking hundreds of years throughout
Yeah.
human history. This has been going on, but no one wants to talk about it. What adult wants to tell a little kid, you know what? I think there's something there to what you're saying.
Hmm.
I need to go talk to your mother. I need to go talk to your father. Because at that point, you're like, my family is at stake. That's what my mom did. Even though we continue to try to make something out of our career, we got to Billboard magazine, we traveled the world, all this stuff. But that underlying emotional stress, there was no way it could last. There was absolutely no way. And like you're saying, it's happening in Jamaica on a daily basis. And those are the ones we know about. The ones that are being, because you know what the silence does? It protects the predator.
Yeah.
Because when you tell your mom and you tell your dad, your aunt, your uncle, it's like a spider in the center of a web feeding on everyone. And everyone who does not do anything, the web just gets bigger. Or I'm going to tell the next person, and they don't do anything, the web just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And those who do nothing end up becoming part of the predator's protective detail. They are sacrificing the children for whatever ego they have, they feel they need, their image, their family image, but it's the children who are being impacted. And it impacts them in school, it impacts them in relationships. And with brothers, this is what I know, because there is no support for us. The men we grow to become will be directly impacted by the support we do or do not get. So if we don't get any support, how are we going to treat women as we get older?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the big question for me. Without the support, the men we grow to become and how we interact with women and girls will be directly impacted by the support we do not get or we do get. I called a therapist toward the end of my book. I said, I got to talk to a therapist about this. And she said to me, I can't help you. She's a family trauma therapist. And I said, what do you mean you can't help? She said, because you're a man. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm in stress. My family's in stress. I need to tell you. She said, if you were a woman, I could help you.
Wow.
And that's, at that point, it became a matter of gender. It became a matter of, even though I was innocent, even though I did nothing, even though I'm the one who has done something to help my sisters she said, no. I said, well, where am I supposed to go? What is a brother supposed to do? She said, I don't know. I said, okay, let me give you this example. If my family was in a car crash and I was the only survivor, could you help me? She said, oh yeah, I could help you. I said, well, that's the same trauma I'm talking about. It's emotional, it's PTSD, it's all these things. She said, yeah, but you're a brother and I can't help you. So I said, so it was a matter of what's between my legs that's stopping you.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, well, I said, yeah, that's the only difference here. We have got to come up with a way, and that's my thing. I have got to come up with a way to bring legislation, to bring community leaders, to bring community activists, to bring families together to have this discussion. Because brothers cannot be the only ones left out of the conversation.
Absolutely.
It just cannot be.
Absolutely. So wow. You said something that I think some may gloss over even listening to this podcast. But to this day, you said your mom don't want to talk about this. And that's something that I think hovers over family when it comes to like family secrets.
Right.
And that's something that's going on right now today. I wanted to ask you, man, how did you find the courage, knowing that you're carrying that burden, to say, now is the time for me to speak up and put this in a book, speak to a counselor, start getting on stage and tell my story, knowing that there could be some, blowback or something like that from family members and things like that?
What I did, I had decided I just couldn't take it anymore. I'm going to write the book. So I decided to go to my second sister and said, I need to talk to you about something. I'm going to write a book about what happened to us from a brother's perspective, because there's nothing out there for brothers. And are you okay with that? I was going to write it anyway, because it is my story. And she said something that completely caught me off guard. She said, of course you should write your book. All you boys should write a book. It's not my story, it's your story, but you all should write a book about what happened. Her embracing my wanting to do this all the shackles that were holding me back just fell away. And then that gave me the courage to contact my other sisters and tell them, this is what I'm going to do. I know it's not going to sit well with you, but they said, it's okay. And that's the fear for a brother. Because as you had mentioned earlier, my mother not only did not want to talk about it, but she empowered our stepfather. Okay, you don't want to talk about it. I am going to tell my sisters what's going on. And they were all for it. It completely caught me off guard. I was expecting, you mentioned the blowback. I was expecting hell to be unleashed on me. How dare you? Blah, 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 blah. You can't do this. It's not your story. But it is my story. That's exactly the point. And so I've mentioned to other women as I was writing the book, I'm writing this story from a brother's perspective and to a woman. All of them started out like this. When I said, I'm going to write a story about what happened in our family from a brother's perspective. And this is what we've gone through. To a woman, they all stopped me about a minute in and said, you can't talk about it.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, what do you mean I can't talk about it? She said, it's your sister's story. You can't talk about it. I said, it is my story. It's a brother's story. This is what happened to me. This is what I was feeling. This is what I was dealing with. She said, they all said it doesn't make any difference. I said, okay. But I will tell you this. I was molested 6 years before my sisters. And that's when the 180 degrees turns. Like, oh, I didn't know. I didn't know you were molested. I said, I know you didn't. That should not matter. But it does. And I get it because you are a woman. I get it. We talked about historically earlier what men have done. So it brought a different sense of importance to what I was talking about for them. But it's really interesting to be told, because I am a brother, I have no say so in the matter. But we do. That's just the point. No one wants to hear from us. No one cares. And brothers have to carry this burden in silence. We are suffering from PTSD. We are suffering from guilt. We're suffering from shame. We're suffering from all sorts of stuff. And there's no one we could talk to. We don't even talk to ourselves. How many men are going to go talk to another guy and say, this is what happened. This is what I'm feeling. But this is mental. This is emotional trauma. This is mental trauma. We need to be able to have some place where we can go to help us get through it. We've got a 12-step program for every freaking thing on the planet. But there's not a one-stop program for a guy. My book is the very first book to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just book 1 of book 3. This is helplessness. Book 2 is hopefulness. How did I find hope in the middle of this abyss, this darkness? Well, I started remembering happy times. And I started clinging to those. And I started to remember family or friends who were always helpful. And I would reach out to them. So that gave me hope. And then the third book will be happiness. I'm happy. I'm very happy now. Been married 37 years. I got 2 kids. But being happy, and Michael, you know this better than anyone because of your story. Being happy doesn't mean you are trauma-free.
No.
It means you have found a place that will allow you to go forward in a positive way. I choose to take my family's trauma and move forward with it in a positive way to help other children and families heal. So from helplessness to hopefulness to happiness, that's what life is about. And as you mentioned early on in the podcast, there are different degrees to our helplessness, different degrees to our hopefulness, and different degrees to our happiness. It all matters.
So you just talked about quite a few emotions that we bottle in: fear, anxiety, unforgiveness, macho, shame, PTSD. And you chose to break the bottle and release all of those things. And you're now on a mission to help people, share your story, and become an impact. I wanted you to talk a little bit about what were the steps that you decided to put in place to get to this level of happiness, to get to this level of joy, this
Mhm.
level of peace of mind that you now have, right? How did you
Right.
do that? How did you prioritize things in your life just to get to this level?
It would be very, I think, callous of me to say it was easy because
Hmm.
no, no. There is no easy to this. I had to come up with a way that would allow me to forgive myself
Mm.
because of things I could have done, should have done, would have done. Like I said, I eventually got to my stepdad 3 years, 3 months before I was to be married and told him, you have 24 hours to leave the house. But that was just the beginning
Hmm.
because after I got him out of the house, I needed to come up with a way to help me. So I just decided, look, I can tell you what had happened. My wife and I have been married 37 years. And I was having a rough day about 25 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. And it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. And I just sat up and I said, you know what? I don't care what anyone says. You're a good guy. So I got up and I went into the bathroom. I looked in the mirror and I just looked at myself in the mirror and I just said, you're a good guy. You are a good person. It's okay what anyone else thinks. That talking to myself meant I was recognizing my pain. I was giving it meaning. And then that meant I could go forward. So then I started talking to my wife more about it. And then I started calling a brother, said, look, I need to talk to you. I started identifying people I could talk to who would give me the time to talk without any judgment. You got to be really careful when you share this kind of stuff with people because
Absolutely.
most people are going to tell you, yeah, this, yeah, that. You need to see them to be quiet. You just want to talk. That's all you want to do. Don't say a word. Really, that's. I'm not here for your opinion. I just need someone to listen. Once I was able to do that, I was able to begin to change who I am. But like I said, that is not easy to do. So I started identifying people I could talk to, which was the biggest thing. Because what ends up happening with this PTSD, it becomes part of your DNA.
Mm.
And like DNA, it replicates. And it usually replicates in ways you can't see or hear, but it is impacting every aspect of your life. It began to impact how I was relating to my own son. And I saw it, and I saw like, oh, what the hell? He is not responsible for any of this. Do not give him that burden. Oh, no, 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 no. And then my daughter came along. It's like I was more aware of it. Oh, no, she doesn't get to carry this burden, but I will tell them the story. So as I did that, I just got, I got scared that I would never be able to have the relationships with my sisters that I once had because we had so much fun. And one day, like when I went to my sister to tell her what I wanted to do,
Uh-huh.
I would sit at home and say, okay, I'm going to call her. I would pick up the phone and I would do this. I'd let a month go by. This phone weighed 10,000 pounds. It was it was the heaviest thing I could have ever imagined picking up. And every week I'd go, okay, I'm doing it this time. Oh, oh, you know what? I gotta go watch the paint on the fence dry.
Mm.
That's real important. I gotta
Mm.
go pick up some leaves. Oh, wait a minute. I need to change my shoelaces. That's more important. The fear, the fear of facing the thing you are most afraid of is what stops us. But as I said, once I did it, one sister said okay, another said okay, and then another said okay. We have got to get there. So once I did that, I'm writing the book now, right?
All right.
And I'm just reliving everything. And then something happened that I had never recognized. And this is so key for men, especially Black men. My wife and I are in bed. Now, this is maybe 10 years ago. I'm 55 years old. I never recognized that what my babysitter had done to me was child abuse, was sexual abuse. Never even occurred to me. So we're in bed, and she says to me, she looks across, she says, "You know you're a victim." And I said, "No, I'm not. What are you talking about? You're a victim." I said, "Oh, no." She said, "You've been abused. You've been this. How can you not see you're a victim?" She said, "Look at you. You're a mess. You're sweating. You're shaking. You are just having such a problem writing this." But I'm not a victim." She said, "You are a victim. All you boys are victim." And that's the thing. Men will not call ourselves a victim. Because if you are a victim, that means what? You've just gone through some shit.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
And
the key is
we don't want the title of
we don't want the title. The
victim,
key
weak,
is
or any of those things, you know.
right. The key is, which I imagine for you is, I'm an effing survivor. That's what I am. If I'm here today talking about this, and I am learning and growing and coming back to myself, that means I'm a survivor. And for a man, and we are, particularly with Black men, we are so proud, and rightfully so.
Right.
But society has placed this additional burden on Black men and being strong,
Right.
and having this superhuman strength. You know, it is a good thing because it gives us courage, it gives us confidence, it gives us, it gives us some pop when we need it. But emotionally, it's a burden, and mentally, it's a burden, and it can consume us to become a mental health challenge. It becomes a mental health issue because we don't normally seek out help. I'm too proud. And my wife would say, you probably give you some trauma. I'm like, hell no. Now, my wife, she's white and she's Jewish. She's married 37 years. I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't need to see any therapist. Are you kidding? I'm a brother. That's not what we do. And that is so ass backward, in my opinion. I think if there's any group of people that need to be talking to someone the most, it's us. Because we carry in so much of everyone else's stuff. And
that is so true.
When you throw in sexual abuse, what guy wants to admit that they've been sexually abused? Because that means, you didn't have the power, the strength to stop it. What young boy who grew up in the inner city, and this could be inner city anywhere, this could be the inner city in Jamaica, wants to go out and tell their friends while they're balling, pass me the rock. I'm going deep. Oh, by the way, during the timeout, this happened yesterday. No,
you can't talk about that.
No, exactly. That's it. What you just said. No, you can't talk about it. And that's what we have been handed. That burden of we can't talk about it. But we can, and we must, and we should, because it impacts the next generation. It impacts our children, our grandchildren, and it impacts relationships with our sisters. But more importantly, the damage done to us specifically, the trauma is real.
It is real. Heber, you said something that I want to unpack a little bit, and then it impacted me when I got into dating and trying to court my wife now, and just different relationships. And then it also impacted me once I had a son and becoming like a helicopter type of dad. If you can, man, can you talk a little bit about how that impacted you when she got into dating and before you got involved and things like that when it came to relationships, did any of your past affected how you looked at relationships?
Yeah.
And then you as a parent now, did anything from your past impacted how you parent your kids now too as well?
So how it impacted relationships, it really knowing that for my sisters, there was this period of time where I could have, would have, and should have done something. But as I said earlier, my mom kept saying she'll handle it, and she never did until I finally stepped up and was the one to do something. But I really questioned whether or not I could be the type of man who could protect someone that I'm dating.
Mhm.
Do I have what I need? Because I stepped back. I didn't handle things. And so as a man, when you know you didn't handle things for your sisters, how can you possibly handle something for someone else when they're not even as close as your sisters? So for me, it's like it wasn't a matter of being choosy. It was a matter of, can I date?
Mm,
Am I dating material?
mm,
Because as I look back, I'm like, what if I end up being like my biological dad was? Talk about jumping from the frying pan into the fire. My father was the frying pan, and he beat my mother mercilessly. And I watched that growing up as a kid up until age 10. When my mom finally just left and just put all of us in the car and said, you know what, I'm out of here. And just ran from Portland in the middle of the night down to LA without him even knowing. So I did not. I saw that my entire life. I saw beating. I saw this. I figured, okay, that's the way it's supposed to be.
mm.
But I know women ain't. They're not going for that. So who am I to ask them for a date? So I finally found the courage, to say, okay, I'm not gonna be out here by myself. I'm just looking like they just. No, this is not gonna. This is not gonna go down like this. So I just started to say, okay, I have what I need. I've seen the worst. That is what I'm not going to be.
Mhm.
Talking to my son about this the other day. 2 nights ago, we do anime night. Me and my
Mhm.
kids every Tuesday night. Love it, absolutely love it. And so we were talking about what I saw, and I said, I cannot be that type of man. On a podcast that I did, he interviewed me for a podcast, and he said, you know what? After seeing what you did with your sisters, my aunts, I'm hoping I could be that kind of man. And it just brought me to tears.
Mm.
Because there's always someone watching. We don't think
Absolutely.
there's always someone looking from 100 miles away to 100 feet away to 100 inches away. There's always someone watching you.
Right.
So my wife and I, we have our son. And as I said earlier, I started recognizing how